Yeah, like what if my addiction is pride?
Right.
What- How do you get to step one, right?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Fire Pit Chat with Ben and Joe. I'm Joe. Hey, Ben, how are you?
I'm doing well, man.
We are continuing our series with 12 Steps to Peace. And today we're going to talk about building a spiritual base. We're going to look at steps 1, 2, and 3. And again, really, really important. The focus on the steps here is a framework, right? So it's a framework that we can all potentially use if we want to. Everything's at your own will, your own free will. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have an addiction problem or an eating problem or a gambling problem. It may not be you have a problem at all, but there may be a certain compulsion or a sin, or maybe just something that you're doing in your life that's nagging at you, or maybe your pastor has been talking to you privately, say, hey, look at this or look at that, or maybe something he's preaching on Sunday, and you realize, I've got that, and I can't seem to shake it. So we're really hoping today to really put together a framework of some tools, a toolkit, maybe some resources, and some different perspective maybe than you've heard before to help you with that. And certainly, it's an ongoing thing, for us. And we, if there's any comments, feedback, questions, we'd love to hear any and all of that. Any thoughts on that, Ben?
Nope, I'm just excited to get into this. I think in our last episode, you really helpfully laid out how this is not a framework that is only for kind of big, obvious, acute problems that I'd say almost all of us have seasons in life where we run into one of those where you just realize, wow, I'm really, really up against something I don't know how to handle. But this is really deeper than that. It's just about a general understanding of kind of who we are and what our inner life is about and how to tend that and build that out and quite honestly be in sort of house cleaning mode with that and where do we find the resources for that. So I'm just hoping this will be something that's really broadly useful.
Right, and that thing. So in the first step, in the Alcoholics Anonymous world, is we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable, and that's the only time in the 12 steps in Alcoholics Anonymous, and in probably all of the different recovery groups that have adopted some form of the 12 steps. Usually, that word is only in that first step,
Mm-hmm.
and then the next 11 have to do that. So you can insert your own word, and it could be
Yeah.
something. It could be I'm powerless over getting angry with my wife, or it could
Mm-hmm.
be not taking out the garbage. It could
Mm-hmm.
be lust. It could, and it may not be an addiction or compulsion. You may not be may not need rehab, but it could be again part of you that you're just saying, I can't let go of this thing. It's been 10 years or 20 years, or it's become this compulsion in my mind. And so it doesn't necessarily, to your point, have to be this huge thing, but it's a personal thing. It's something that is personal to you that on my own, I'm not able to stop this. I'm on my own. I'm not able to affect a change that either I want to change, or perhaps my wife or family wants me to change, or again, my pastor's, putting these great suggestions towards me, but I just can't seem to stop doing this thing. And so I just want to, if there's any kind of stigma about 12 steps, you have to have some big issue or big problem.
Yeah.
As part of this framework, that's not really what we're talking about.
Yeah. So if I could say something here from a kind of distinctively Christian point of view, there's a statement I heard once that's been very illuminating for me. We're not sinners because we sin. We sin because we're sinners. And it gets back to this idea that's very strong in the Bible and in historic Christian theology, that we are born with a moral problem, right? That we are the way the psalmist expresses it. I was conceived in iniquity. There's a need for grace and a need for help because since our first parents fell into sin, we all are born with a this deep inner tendency toward trying to be autonomous, trying to run our own lives, trusting in our own wisdom, tending to move away from God as opposed to toward God. The Bible even uses words like a kind of hostility toward God, and it's very hard those are hard words. They're not flattering
Right.
at all. But I think that they kind of help us get into this water of, it's not like there are special people that that are specially, those are the sinners out there. Those are the people that really need, they really need Jesus, or they really need the 12 steps or whatever. No, I'm that. I need grace, and that's true no matter how cleaned up your life might feel.
Absolutely. And to me, it's the beginning. So the step one is a lot about finding that bottom.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that surrender, right? The beginning is the end. And we talked about that with the Les Miserables movie, right? We talked about that. But a lot of these things may be things that only I think, and it may be true. I may be the only one who knows how I think about a certain thing.
Yes.
But then when I am with myself, right, and I'm by myself, or I'm in quiet time or prayer meditation, it's repetitive. I keep bringing this up, that I can't stop doing this. I can't stop doing this thing. And they say in recovery, only 50.1% of you needs to want to get rid of it to make that start.
Yeah.
Right. And so it doesn't have to be this. I said, I'm done. I'm swearing off this thing or this behavior. Right. Is just getting to that part, and that's the surrender. Is 50.1% of me wanting to make this change, or wanting to address this thing that it is that's bothering me, that's become a problem in my life, whether even problem in my head or a problem in different relationships.
It'd be interesting to have a conversation sometime about what almost seems to me to be a pre-step before step one, and that is working on your own sense of desperation. If that's even possible. Sometimes it really does require something in our lives that just shows us unmistakably, wow, man, I need help.
Right.
It drives us to a place of almost, as Martin Luther once put it, a despair that is very near to grace. It seems to me that the 12 steps really pick up where you have come to terms to some degree, with the fact I cannot deal with this on my own. But I don't want to derail the conversation about step one, but it just seems to me there is a fair bit that's going on in someone's life. It's very easy to be self-satisfied. That has to be ruptured, it seems to me, somewhat before you're even really in the steps.
Absolutely. And it's easier in a sense if there is a glaring,
Right.
if I got a DWI, right? Or if my doctor says I weigh too much and I need to diet and I can't. In some ways it's easier than if it's something that's between a relationship or in somebody's marriage, right? If it's in my marriage, it's not as, because the consequences don't seem as bad. It's like, oh, I'll deal with it later. I'll deal with it later. And so there is that point that in some ways it is easier if there's a big glaring overt issue.
Yeah, like what if my addiction is pride?
Right.
How do you get to step one, right?
And so I think that, and there are some groups that say call it step zero, and that step zero, and some people call that life. Either one is sort of brings you to this place of when you're on your potentially on your knees. And again, it may be if it's a bigger issue, it's glaring, but it can also be that pride. It could be anger. Could be could be that I'm just an angry guy. I don't like it. My kids don't like it. My wife doesn't like it. My friends don't like it. And it could be I'm an angry guy, but I don't know how to not be angry. And this is the beginning of that shift from I'm angry because of politics, or I'm angry because of lockdowns, or I'm angry, and not to say these things don't produce anger. It's a feeling, it's emotion. We talked about earlier episodes. All emotions come from God, so by nature are good. But it's that I take it, if I take it to that next level, and suddenly it's like, man, I can't stop being angry. I'm powerless over my anger.
Yeah.
And so the powerless is that first part, and we get there, and then this really speaks to what you're talking about, right? Because now I need to go back and admit, and the second word is admit, and how we admit is there are different ways to do that. That my life has become unmanageable with that thing. So if anger is driving me, and I find that I'm angry at the dinner table, and I'm angry when I'm watching TV, and I'm angry when my kids want to talk to me, how has that made my life unmanageable? My entire life may not be unmanageable. I may have a good job and be in a marriage, but with that thing, that personal word, that anger, for example, it's unmanageable with my anger.
Yeah, and I think this gets us away from what seems to me to be a very, very popular kind of modern notion that everything can just be boiled down to finding a better technique. Um, it's interesting to me that these 12 steps do not present themselves as a technique, something you use to kind of tinker or tinker with something, or just find a better way of managing it. It begins with the assumption, no, actually, I'm up against something unmanageable. That's that's a pretty radical starting point, it seems to me, in the modern view of humans, which is, find the right lever to pull, and everything can sort of be worked out.
Well, it's the cookie diet,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
You want to lose weight? They came out with a cookie diet. That solves my problem. I can eat cookies all day and I'm going to lose weight. It's a miracle.
Exactly. Oh gosh, yeah, perfect.
Right. So, yeah, the focus here is that admitting, and there's the words are here for a reason, right? Words have meaning. So, I'm powerless over this thing. We'll use the example of anger, and that with anger, my life has become unmanageable. I'm finding myself more and more angry. I'm finding myself unable to control my anger, or its anger is coming out in different ways, or my anger is leading to other behaviors that I don't like. Let's say I
Hmm.
pulled somebody over on the road and gave them the finger, or whatever that is, right? So and that takes honesty, and that takes help, and sometimes, and so this is when we say building our spiritual base to get outside of myself, because I'm if it's pride, right, I think I'm great. So
Hmm.
it's everybody else, and that's why it starts with that. That's why we say 50.1%, because if we wait to 100%, no, because I could have pride, and
Yeah.
with that I could also be questioning my pride, and my pride
Yes.
might be 60% and my questioning maybe 40%, but that
Yep.
magical moment when the questioning becomes 50.1%, that's when I can make my beginning.
Hmm. Yes. Yes, and I have a thought related to that, but I might save it to the second step, just because it seems to me that, well, I'll say it now, and then it'll maybe introduce that second step. There is, in that moment of turning, isn't it important to have some sense that there's grace at the end of that road, which is to say, there actually is help to be had. I guess what I'm poking at here is realizing I'm a disaster is great, but if that just produces despair, it doesn't seem to me that we're like, I could have 50.1% of me that's like, wow, I'm a train wreck and I just so very much need help. But that in itself might not move me to try to go anywhere constructive with it. It could just drive me further into sort of self-destruction. Is that, am I making sense with that? I
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and that's why we say it's, it's enough to make the beginning,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If I'm at 50.1%, and I know in this election time we're all worried about percentage, but if it is 50.1% of me,
Yeah.
that's enough to make a beginning. And that is I'm powerless. So in with step one, you're defeated, right? It's a defeated step. I'm powerless over this thing, and this thing has made my life, or my relationship to this thing has made my life in that area unmanageable. There's not a lot of hope in step one. There's just a lot of surrender.
It's the end of sovereignty, right? I mean, it's,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. A good way to put it. Yeah, I know what living this way will do with this issue. Well, I know where it will take me in my life, and I'm here.
Right. Right.
Right?
Yes. And
I'm I'm
and at
here.
some level I don't want to be here.
Right. And if we go back to Les Miserables, right, with Valjean, where he stole silver from the bishop that gave him food and clothing and warmth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I'm here. Living on my own got me here. So first step, there isn't a lot of hope necessarily with the first step. It's really more of, hey, are you sure you're beaten? Right? Are you sure you're beaten? Uh, the old timers in Alcoholics Anonymous, if back in the day, would if some guy said I'm not done, they would hand him a $20 bill and say, go, go finish the job. You
Yeah.
know, you need to really be done.
Yeah.
At least 50.1% of you needs to
Yep.
be done for you to
Yep.
take this step, because it does, and that's why it's the spiritual piece, because I on my own will never do that.
Yeah.
And so that 50.1% could be the opening of the door of God, that God is now showing me, hey, this is a problem.
I don't know if I should admit this on the air, but I've actually said to people in pastoral counseling, come back when you want help.
It's true.
You might need to scrub that out of the recording, but No, I'm sort of kidding. I mean, there have been moments when I've realized that's the problem. We're trying to solve a problem that actually has not really been seen as the problem it is.
Yeah, and that's what the first step is the 2x4 in the forehead. It's
Hmm.
the game
Yep.
is over. No more charade. I'm not gonna pat you in the back and wipe your nose. Are you power? Can you admit you're powerless and
Yes.
that your life is unmanageable? Because that's the doorway in. That's the
Yes.
price of admission. And if
Yes.
you're ready to do that, here's a warm seat.
Yep.
Here's a cup of coffee, and that. But again, we don't need to necessarily do that. It could be with my anger, and so that becomes an internal thing. Like, wow,
Hmm.
or my pride. Yeah, I can see in moments, and that 50.1% can go up and down. But if I've opened my idea and I'm aware that when it's 50.1%, let me jump on that,
Yes.
right? Then I could see, yeah, I could see in this one case my pride got me into trouble. Okay, that's a starting point, and maybe the planting of a seed. Or in my anger, okay, I could see that wasn't right when I snapped at the
Yep.
person at the grocery store. It's not their fault they're out of milk or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's that opening. But the first step's not there's not a lot of hope, and it's on purpose. I think. I mean, there's when you look back on it, there's a lot of hope. But in that
Yes.
moment, in the experience of it, it's really more of a gut check and say, are you seriously now want to look at this thing?
I think it can enable us to appreciate how good it is when things in life create self-doubt.
Mm,
I kind of hate that when things in life make me question myself, kind of rock my sense of, I don't know, competency, or just make me wonder if the trajectory that seems so obvious to me is maybe actually far from obvious. But I think this step is can help us appreciate that can sometimes be some of the that can be one of the best things that happens to us, is just things that make me realize, wow, I am truly not all that.
absolutely, yeah. And so this is the point where this is the stripping down, right, of ego.
Hmm.
It's a stripping down. This is a humble place to be.
Hmm.
And again, whether it's a big, a big overt thing or a small thing that I'm working on, it's so important to build a spiritual base is that I take myself out of it and I need to be humbled. I need to be brought
Yep.
to my knees with this thing before I could ever hope to rise above it. Because again, if I had been able to do it without God, without the spiritual base, I would have done it already.
Right.
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 If I'm suffering over something, I would have done it already. So the biggest clue is that I'm still doing this, right? I mean, there's
Yep. Yep.
sometimes it's so simple. It's I'm still doing this thing, and no matter what I've tried, I'm still doing it.
I know we have other steps to talk about, but that too is kind of a modern way of looking at ourselves. Though, give me time, I'll figure it out.
Right.
Just basically time. The existing situation plus time will somehow resolve itself. And I don't know. I think there is a deeper self understanding where I realize more time is not what I need. This is where I kind of question the whole idea of second chances. I don't. You could give me 20 chances with certain things. That is not what I need. I don't need another chance. I need help.
Right. And I think sometimes that help looks like someone needs to externally help me reach out a hand or give me money or give
Yeah.
me a
Yeah.
job. When the help is, no, I need to stop doing what I'm
Yes.
doing because
Yes.
my way of doing things is not working out.
Absolutely. Well said.
And so that gets to that place of that bottom piece. And yeah, and it's been said so many times, right? The definition of insanity is
Hmm.
doing the same thing and expecting different results.
Hmm.
And to your point, two chances or 20 chances, if something doesn't fundamentally change in my thinking, in my relationship to myself, my relationship to God, I'm going to keep doing the same thing. And there are times when I think about that saying and it still confuses me. I'm like, no, there's got to, so even no matter what, there's times that definition of insanity sounds like it's true to me in the opposite.
Yeah. Well, right. I mean, if you're doing something that's working well, be steady with it, keep it up. But I think it's those moments when, my word, and I stun myself with this sometimes. It's not just that it isn't working well, like that's a failed experiment. It's actually producing ruin, and I keep going back to it. Like, what's with that? So yeah, there is a real insanity there. You've lost touch. I can lose touch with reality. It's an amazing thing.
Yeah. So step one I'll say not a lot of hope, but it's really it's a gut check step.
Yeah.
It's a place where I've really got to sit down and look myself in the eye, in the mirror, and say, am I really able to do this, or is just going to be the 21st chance? And am I going to be
Mm.
back here today, tomorrow? And I think that cycle, as you talk about, that repetition leads someone to get to that 50.1% where they say, okay, this thing is now bigger than me, or it's above my pay grade, or I just don't like it. There's a saying, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, and
Yes.
I can't stop doing whatever
Yes.
it is, and
Yes.
that's the purpose of the first step. Everybody, thanks for listening in, and we'll see you next time.